Well, guys, tonight I want to talk to you for a few minutes about leading decisively in an indecisive world. And the world we live in, it feels like there are more questions and more variables than ever before. And anybody struggles to some degree with making decisions. Sometimes the more information we have, the worse it is. I had read an article a while back about decision making, and it was talking about decision making when it comes to buying a car. I don't know about you, but one of the worst decisions or hardest decisions I've ever made is what kind of car to buy, because there are a million options and there's a million different things to consider, and there's so many different kinds and all those different things. And really what I want to help you do tonight is just kind of talk through what does it look like to make decisions quickly. And some people, let me just say this from the start, some people are wired for it a little more, because for me, I tend to be someone who makes a lot of decisions based on my gut feeling. So I'm more likely to have less information and make a decision based on how I feel, rather than my wife is someone who says, I want to get all the information possible before we make a decision. And I'm kind of the opposite. And so depending on how you're wired, it makes it easier for you, or maybe more challenging for you, to be decisive quickly. And so just know, this is kind of from my perspective, steps to take. And if you're a note taker, I've got seven. I've got 7. It took me a minute to figure out what a Roman numeral 6 and 7 was. So I almost cut it to 5 just for that. But we've got 7 points tonight. So let me walk through these. The very first thing that I think is most important in being decisive as a leader is you have to know the vision. You have to be very well acquainted with the vision. It's got to be sown into your soul. You've got to know what the vision is for your organization, for your department, for even you personally. Even making personal decisions, I think one of the most important thing to know is what is my vision? What do I want to be? What do I want to do? What am I really all about? Because when you know that, it's going to help filter your decisions better. You're going to be able to filter your decisions through the vision. So it's really important to understand that. Now, I know in business settings, everybody has a vision statement of some kind. At Summit Church, our vision statement is to see every life made different. That's why we exist. That's why we do what we do. And we filter decisions through the vision. And so I'll give you an example. There are organizations in our community that we will not partner with, not because they're not good, but because they are not working to see someone's spiritual life transformed for Jesus' glory. Now, they're working to make somebody's life better, which is great. That's wonderful, but that's not what we are about. We don't want to just make somebody's life better. We want to see their life transformed, made new in Christ Jesus. And so that is a filter we use to say no to certain organizations that we just won't partner with. And it's not that they're bad, but we have to say no to those so that we can be more decisive about who we're going to partner with and what we're going to do. So we understand our vision, and that helps us filter through, make those decisions easily. So when Steph McCoy is our missions and outreach director, she'll come to me and say, hey, Mel, what do you think about this organization? And it's easy for me to go, no, we're not going to partner with them because. So understanding our vision helps me filter that decision better. It helps me be more decisive. So let me just share a couple of vision statements with you. And if you're here in the room, you can shout out. These are all major organizations. I'm going to read a mission statement or the vision statement to you, and I want you to try to tell me who this is. To provide access to the world's information in one click. Google, absolutely. And probably one of the reasons you knew that is if you do a Google search, you pull up google.com, and all it says is Google and a search bar. That's it. What they're trying to do is simplify it, make it as easy as possible, right? They understand who they are, and it filters, their vision filters who they are. Here's another one. Our vision is to be the Earth's most customer-centric company, to build a place where people can come to find and discover anything they might want to buy online. Amazon.com. Have you ever noticed in their logo, they've got the little arrow? That originally was to say that you can get anything from A to Z. That's what that A to Z was. Anyway, they know what they're doing. If you noticed a couple things in their statement, they want to be customer-centric, so they're putting the customers first. If you shop on Amazon, you know how easy it is to shop, right? Unfortunately, some of your spouses might shop too much on Amazon, but it's easy to shop. It's easy to return things. It's simple, and they make it very clear. Anything you might want to buy online, they are not interested in brick and mortar. They are interested in an online experience. Let's go to another one. This company's mission statement is to make the best products on earth and to leave the world better than we found it. That one's a little tougher. Anybody want to take a guess? I'm willing to bet that you might have their product in your pocket right now. Apple. Absolutely. Now, you might disagree that Apple makes one of the best products on earth, but I in my hand have two of their products right now. I tend to believe Apple is makes wonderful products. You might disagree with their ethics or some of the other things or even the second part of that statement, but at the end of the day, their vision is to make the best products possible and to leave the world a better place. Here's another one. This one is found more traction in the last year or so. Their stock prices have just spiked. This company, their vision is to create the most compelling car company of the 21st century by driving the world's transition to electric vehicles. Tesla, right? But this vision statement makes it very clear who they are and what they're all about. What do they want to do? They want to be the most compelling car company of the 21st century. They want to be the car company that everybody wishes they had that car. How are they going to do it? By driving the transition in our culture from combustion to electric. Now, you might be going, why are we talking about this when we're talking about being a decisive leader? Well, this is what I would say. All of these companies can filter their decisions through their vision statement. They can say, does this help us become the most compelling car company of the 21st century? And if not, then why would we do that? They can say, hey, is this product help us become the best, help us make the best products on earth? And if not, why would we make it? It's not meeting our standards. So it's helping them make decisions about what they do and how they do it. With Google, does anybody remember, gosh, this is old school, like MSN or what was it? Microsoft had a search engine, and when you would go to their page, it had millions of things that would distract you from the search engine. Yahoo was the same way. If you go to Yahoo's homepage, they had a million things and ads and articles and all kinds of things. And what Google did was the opposite. Google said, no, we want this singular thing. We want to make it easy for people, and so it filtered what they did. It made it easier for them to decide what to do and what not to do. So this is what I want you to understand. The vision shapes decision-making by filtering out what matters and what does not matter. So if you don't have a personal vision for your own life, for your own family, if you don't have a vision for your department, if you don't have a vision for your company, this is where you have to have one. Not just so you can put something on your company letterhead, but so that you can filter your decisions better. It helps you make decisions more decisively. Second thing is this, identify the win. I know as a church, COVID helped us have laser focus on what really matters to us as a church. So my questions for you would be, what metrics are you tracking? What metrics should you be tracking? Because I think there's a lot of churches, because that's the industry I understand, there were a lot of churches that I would talk to pastors who would say, you know what, we don't really care about attendance numbers that much. It was like, you are a liar. I know you are, because all pastors care about attendance numbers to some degree. But I think pastors really found out how much they care about attendance numbers after we opened back up, and attendance numbers were half of what they were in the spring before COVID happened. So if we put our value in how many people showed up, whether we claimed that as a value or not, we're in trouble. And there's lots of companies that do the same thing. They'll say, hey, here's what we value, but really at the end of the day, they value something else entirely. And so one of the things that's important for us in decision making is to clearly understand what we really value. What is the real win? How do we measure success as an organization, as a company, as a leader? How do I measure success? And then we have to be laser focused on that, because maybe for you, what's really important is sales. Maybe that's what drives your organization. Well, okay, own that. Be okay with that. Maybe it's revenue. Maybe it's the number of clients. For churches, for us, honestly, attendance is a lagging indicator rather than a leading indicator. Attendance is important for us, but that's not the most important thing. Honestly, for us as a church, a number that's more important than how many people show up on a weekend is how many guests show up on a weekend. Because how many guests show up on a weekend is directly related to how many salvations we will see on a weekend. And for us as a church, the most important number we measure is how many people make decisions for Jesus. How many people are rededicating their lives to Jesus. And so what we've seen is our overall attendance numbers are lower than they were at the beginning of the year. And our guests have decreased, but not at the same scale or same rate as our attendance. So basically, if all we're measuring is attendance, we're going to say we failed because our numbers are half of what they were in the spring. But if we're measuring salvations, if we're measuring people responding, then we're still doing pretty well. And so for you in your industry, what you have to decide is what's really important. What are we measuring? What's of value in what we're doing? Clear strategy and direction are key. So when it comes to your vision, this is going to help measure your direction. Where are we going? What are we doing to get there? And that's the strategy portion, and that's the wins. The wins are going to help you get to where your vision wants to take you. So you have to have clear strategy and direction from the start. And that's going to help you make decisions more effectively, more decisively, quicker. The third thing is this. So those two things kind of go together, and I feel like from here on out, we're kind of deviating a little from things we might normally think through. Make big decisions smaller. Sometimes we agonize over big decisions. And so one of the things we can do is take the big decisions and break them down into a series of smaller decisions. Tony Robbins, whether you like him or hate him, he is influential and a leadership guru, but he talks about this idea and he calls it a decision tree. And so basically, if you imagine a tree, you've got the big decision as the trunk, and then it branches out into all these little decisions. So his thinking is you start with some of the small decisions and work your way in, because the small decisions are easier to make, they're easier to focus on, and they're not as overwhelming, and those will inform your big decision. So let me give you a couple of examples. On a personal level, if you are married and you're in this room or you're watching online, maybe you've had the moment where you thought, am I supposed to marry this person or not? And that is a big decision to make, isn't it? Because you're talking about forever. Like, that's a big thing. And I remember as a 22-year-old man in college, I was dating this girl named Kim Franklin who was beautiful and funny and smart and all these things. And I had this conversation with my dad. Dad, am I supposed to marry her? I don't know. And it felt overwhelming. And my dad helped me by just asking me some simple questions. Questions like, do you enjoy spending time with her? Do you enjoy your conversations together? Do you like her family? Does her family like you? All these questions are not as daunting as the big question, should I marry this person? Those little questions inform the big question, though. The little decisions going, hey, do I want to be part of that family? Is that a family that I could see myself connected to the rest of my life? Those decisions inform the bigger decision, and it makes the bigger decision not as hard. Let me deal with one that's more corporate for us. If you supervise staff, and the same is true to some degree, even if you're supervising volunteers, but especially if you're supervising staff, there will come a point, if you're supervising staff, that you have to make a decision, should this person be employed by our company anymore? No matter what field you're in, if you have staff, you've probably asked that question about somebody who works for you. And that is an agonizing question to ask, because nobody wants to fire anybody. It's easy to rationalize and reason away all the reasons you should, because it's easy to go, man, they got a family, man, they've got a retirement, man, they've got whatever, and man, they're nice, or all these things. And it's easy for us to go, and if we're going to be honest, I was talking to a pastor this last week, and they were dealing with a situation on their staff. They have a staff member that they know they need to release, but they don't want to because they're nice and they're a pastor and they love people and they don't want to hurt them. And I told this pastor, I said, in my experience, the first time you feel like you should fire somebody is the moment you should fire them. Because I've never waited and been glad I waited. I've waited and regretted it. I've waited and gone, oh, why did I drag this out for 6 months? Because other things have happened and compounded it. And so I've always wished I would have done it when I felt like I was supposed to. But what we do is we rationalize things away. We feel bad. And so this is a great example of if we will get rid of the question, should I terminate this employee, and go back to, okay, are they performing well? No, they're not. Okay, that informs the bigger decision, right? Do they have a good attitude? Are they helping the culture of the workplace? Yes or no? Like all these questions we're asking are informing the bigger decision. It helps us make a better decision. Now I know, again, none of us want to fire anybody. We like people. We want to be liked by people. But these are just examples of things, of ways we can use this decision tree, taking smaller decisions to inform a bigger decision. And so those are both examples in my life that I've used. So make big decisions smaller, because again, it's easy to agonize over those big decisions. It's easy to get locked into place, get frozen, and not move forward with the decision that we ultimately need to make. Roman numeral 4, IV is what Roman numeral 4 is. Anticipate changes. Some changes are easier to anticipate than others. Some just totally take you off guard, that you have no way that you can foresee what's going to happen. Like, what do we do if there's a global pandemic? Nobody saw this coming, right? Nobody can inform us, here's what you do if a global pandemic occurs. So there's some things that you just don't know about, that you just have to respond to in the moment. But there are changes that happen in your organization or in the culture that we can be ready for if we're anticipating. So maybe we ask ourselves some questions like this. What if one of my staff starts a new firm and takes some of my clients? I'm not trying to point out anybody that might be in the room. It was already in my notes. What happens if a competitor expands? What happens if the market changes? Like, these are all questions we should be asking about our business or about our departments or about, hey, what if the company restructures and eliminates my position? So there are things we should be asking before this comes along. Last month when we did our Q&A at the end, and I don't remember the exact question, but I talked a little bit about AMC theaters. And I am a movie geek. I love going to movies. In the 1920s, about 60% of all U.S. citizens went to the movies at least once a week. By the 2010s, that number was down to about 1 in 10. And I was the 1 in 10, by the way. I was going at least once a week to go see a movie. And I just like the experience. I like my buttered popcorn with my Reese's Pieces. I just like going sitting in the room, watching it on the big screen. I just like it. So I'm interested in this stuff. And AMC Theaters has been around since the 20s. And they've expanded. They've taken more market share. But the industry as a whole is on the decline. And there are 1,000 reasons why the industry is on the decline. And what we see is AMC Theaters, you could have bought their stock in 2016 at about $35 a share. Today, I checked, they closed at $4.32 a share. And they were actually up where they have been over the last few days. They've announced, this is always a bad sign, they announced publicly that they are going to run out of cash by the end of this year or the first quarter of next year. Again, that doesn't instill a lot of confidence. And the question is why? Well, I believe the reason why is they didn't anticipate changes. What they did is they said, our model's not the problem, the market is the problem. The people are the problem, not what we're doing. So what they did is they just made their model bigger. They bought more theater chains, regional theater chains. They made their food better. They tried to give better experiences in the theaters. But what they failed to understand is people were just going to the theaters less and less and less. And so what needed to change is their model, because their model was broken. What's interesting about this is there's now speculation that companies like Netflix might buy AMC in order to have another outlet for their original content, which is ironic because Netflix is all about you getting it at home. And so what we see is a company who failed to recognize that something should be changing in their organization. They failed to recognize, failed to see the changes that were coming, and as a result, they were totally indecisive when it came time to make the decisions they needed to make. I don't know if some of you are old enough to remember this. Do you guys remember Montgomery Ward? Montgomery Ward catalog, man. When I was a kid and the Christmas catalogs would roll in, Sears, Montgomery Ward. I mean, there was a few that would come to my house and I would circle, right? Christmas, I want this and this and this. And we would go through it. And Montgomery Ward was one of the largest retailers in the United States. They were primarily mail order from the time that they were founded in the late 1800s until I think it was 1928, I think, is when they really by 1929, they had over 500 stores. I think they started brick and mortar stores in 1926. So they had 500 stores in 1929. By the 90s, they were in serious trouble because other companies like Walmart, Target, Kmart started sprouting up, and they offered products at very low prices. One of the things that's interesting about Walmart is most of their clientele falls in the lowest 20% of income earners in the United States. Walmart knows who they are. They know who they're trying to reach. They're trying to reach people with low prices. They know you don't care about all the biggest styles, all the biggest shiny, bright. They know that you are interested in low prices. And so that's what they specialize in. And what happened is it undermined Montgomery Ward, even though they were the Goliath. And now fast forward again, now Amazon comes along and they start undermining Walmart because the market has changed and organizations fail to recognize that they need to change as well. Now Walmart's doing what they can, but they're behind the 8 ball on online marketplace just because that's not who they were, and they've started making shifts. But what we have to understand is changes are going to come. And if we fail to recognize changes are coming, no matter how successful, how big organization is, we're going to fail at some point if we don't look at the changes that are coming and anticipate those changes. This is what I want you to do. I want you to imagine what could happen, and when you do that, it will allow you to be more decisive when it does happen. So if you can imagine those things we described earlier. Hey, what if a bigger organization comes into our community? What if my department is split and now I'm stuck managing 2 people instead of 8 people? What if you can imagine those things beforehand, think about what you would do, it's going to make it easier for you to be decisive when that actually does happen. What you don't want to be is Montgomery Ward. And unfortunately, too many places, too many companies are Montgomery Ward. We've got an old, outdated model that is going to lead us to be broken down. It's going to lead us to trying to make decisions when it's too late for the decisions that we should be making. And the 5th thing, be confident. This is the thing, speak with conviction. As much conviction as Owen is speaking with right now. But speak with conviction, because the reality is sometimes we make decisions and we're not totally confident about the decision, but the people you're leading need to believe that you are totally confident about the decision you're making. They need to believe the conviction that you are speaking with. So speak with conviction. Be confident. Number 6, forget perfection. I think sometimes we get stuck in decision-making process because we want the decision to be perfect, and seeking perfection will ultimately lead us to overanalyze and overthink. I've got staff that they struggle with decision-making because they want to have 100% of the problem solved. And you will never, ever, ever get 100% of the questions answered that you have. So what you need to do is start making decisions with 51% of the information. If you have 51% of the information, that's enough to make a decision. And that's going to help you be more decisive, to say, I don't need all the information. If I can get the best information possible, it's enough for me to make a decision about this. Now, what you have to understand is, if you're making decisions with 51% of the information, that means you're going to be wrong sometimes. That means that there's 49% of the information you don't have, and you might be wrong. And anybody who's decisive doesn't mean that they're right all the time. It means that they're going to make the best decision they can as quickly as they can. And so when you're wrong, be honest. That's the last thing. Be honest, because you will get it wrong sometimes. And when you're wrong, just own it. Be honest about, hey, we thought this was going to happen, and that's not what happened. and we messed up, but we're going to get it right next time. We're going to move forward. If you're afraid of being wrong, you will never, ever, ever make progress. So if you're waiting to have 100% of the questions answered, you're going to be stuck. So these are, for me, some of the keys to being decisive and being decisive in your decision-making and your leadership. So yeah, I'll open it up to conversation. 7:26, we got some time, so I'll open it up to the room. We got open mics here at the front. If you're comfortable coming up here, that's great. And it's smaller room size. Michael, do you want to just run a mic around? Is that okay? Okay. We will come to you. That's how we're trying to serve you tonight. We're coming to you. And Todd, are you watching the online stuff? All right. If you've got a question, then you can chime in. So if you're watching online and you got questions about this, let us know. And Pastor Todd Stanley will...
I'll go ahead and start.
There we go.
Okay. So you spoke a bit about the advantages of keeping things simple, and you talked about Google and how they're really simple with their search engine. So I was thinking, how do you keep your vision simple while also pursuing a diversity of talent? And so do you strike a balance between keeping things simple while also trying to get involved in the advantages of being involved in diverse markets? So for instance, AMC wasn't really diverse enough to survive the issues that they went through. So where do you see the balance really? Do you see that when you're looking into hiring people who maybe don't fit in the vision the way that it is right now? Like, how do you handle stuff like that?
I don't know if I'm totally understanding the question, Michael. So help me understand it better. Can you give me an example or be more specific? I know you talked about staff
like if a really good hymnal singer wanted to come sing hymns at Summit Church.
Yeah.
How would you do that? How would you approach that? Do you weigh the balance between pursuing that talent versus keeping your vision simple?
Yeah, so, I mean, we talk about vision, and vision's such a broad, we could talk about vision all day long and talk about all the different aspects of it. I think part of vision is understanding who you are and what your culture is. And so for me, that wouldn't necessarily be like keeping the vision simple might include something like that, but that's contrary to our identity or our culture. And so, it probably is an oversimplification to say filter it through your vision. You really have to filter it through your vision, through your culture, through your identity, all that kind of stuff to make sure it's a fit. Because even, we've got a very diverse staff. Ethnically, politically, all the backgrounds, crazy different backgrounds, but they all fit within the vision and the culture. And so we can pursue diversity as long as it's filtered through vision and culture.
That's good.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. We got a question from the back of the room, from Owen's mom.
So when you talk about decision making, if you're in a situation where you're making decisions with other people, do you have any suggestions for how to, work through decision making when there's other people involved and maybe you don't all have the same vision?
I think in a culture where there are peers that are making decisions together, in a partnership or in when there's multiple people at the C level, I think that what we talked about, the decision tree might be a good fit for that, to say, okay, here's the decision we need to make, but let's talk about the smaller decisions that filter into that. Because, what's the word? Is it cognitive dissonance? So there's this cognitive dissonance when there's too much information. What happens is we can land on something and then we entrench into it. So if there's too many options, you and your spouse want to buy a new car. There's a million different cars, millions of different options, and it's easy to entrench and go, well, this is the best or this is the best. And I think that's where maybe that decision tree might filter those decisions a little bit and go, okay, but But what we really need is something we can afford. And what we really need is something that our whole family can, so we don't need the 2-seat Ferrari that, and so that might be a good way to do that instead of going, well, I think, and then it's like, well, we're at an impasse. So that might be a way to navigate that. Are there any other thoughts on that from the room? Anybody want to share any feedback? I know and I asked the question, I didn't give you time to answer. I know for me, like, I'm the pastor, and the board, I don't serve the board. The board does not serve me. They offer a covering for me, and they offer direction on big things. But if we have to make a decision as a board, I will typically go to those guys individually and have conversations. And not to try to game the room, but to just figure out, hey, how do you feel? Hey, let's have a conversation. Let's talk through this. That way, I know when we go sit in the room together, I know where people are at, and we're not trying to build a consensus in that room. We've already had conversations beforehand. And so I think that's a good strategy too, just to have conversations and know where the team is, know where the other people involved are. So, yeah.
So I'm curious if you see with bigger organizations that the smaller ones inside it have their own vision that falls under the bigger vision, and if that helps or hinders the decision making.
I think, so at our church, every department of the church supports the one vision of seeing every life made different. Now, Ricky might deviate from that a little bit in the youth ministry, but whatever their vision for the youth ministry is, it still supports the vision of every life made different. And so it might be tweaked, it might be adjusted a little bit, but it's still, maybe a better way of saying this, it's going to be contextualized. So for Ricky, it's going to still be some form of every life made different, but it's going to be applied to teenagers, basically, But so here's the thing, in a sales organization, and I know that's more your context, I think at the end of the day, it's still sales. It's still, we're moving products. We're getting this from here to here. Everything else is kind of window dressing. And so I think you can deviate from that some, but at the end of the day, the bottom line is still the bottom line.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
It doesn't benefit me to really sit down and brainstorm it out when they have a good mission.
Not necessarily, but again, I know with what you do, it's not just we're going and closing people and moving product. There's more to it than that. And so I think there's some peripheral things that can support it, but I don't know. At the end of the day, you can get real cute, but at the end of the day, you're moving product. You're selling things. So does that make sense?
Zach online says, Herb Keller with Southwest Airlines had to say, ready, fire, aim.
Yeah.
They empower employees to take decisive action, but sometimes that got them into interesting situations. Can you speak to this via empowering your employees and the benefits while managing the downside risk?
So one of the things we've talked about as a staff in years past, and we haven't used this language as much lately, but really we've talked about this. We want to push decisions as far down the flow chart as we possibly can. So we don't want decisions to terminate with me, because if they do, we're never going to make any decisions, So we want to push them as far down the flow chart as we possibly can. So we want to push decision making all the way down into volunteers, into our dream team's hands. We want them to make decisions about things. And is there downside to that? Absolutely there is. I'm not, it's too early for me to be specific about this. I had an employee just recently made a decision about something, and I was like, that is 100% not what I would have done. I would have done something totally different than that. But it wasn't about something that really mattered, so I had to go, okay, I can live with this. Like, I don't love this, but this person feels empowered. They know I trust them, and I'm going to address it with them. We're going to talk about it, but I had to just go, okay, is the empowerment of this employee worth me not getting what I want? And in this situation, 100% it was. And so there's going to be situations like that we just have if you are trying to empower the people below you on the flow chart. And that's the same thing that's true with all of our leaders that are working with Dream Team, with our volunteers. They're going to have volunteers make decisions that we go, oh, that's probably not what I would have done. but let's talk about it, let's talk through it, and I can live with that because we're empowering people. So there's gonna be a trade-off there. The trade-off is Southwest, their employee loyalty is crazy high. Their customer loyalty is crazy high because people love the culture, and part of that culture is we're gonna empower people to say yes. We're gonna empower our employees to say yes to our clients. And so I think that's the trade-off. You build a probably healthier culture, but you're gonna get some things you don't always want because you're not micromanaging everything. So did that answer some of the question, I think, Todd, for Zach?
Yeah,
online?
So. We do have another one from online.
Yeah, lay it on me.
All right, so Lisa asks, you touched on having staff that get stuck on wanting to make the best decision and end up being too indecisive to actually make a decision. Talk about how to go about retraining yourself on how to make a decision.
Man, if I could answer that question effectively, I would write a book and tithe off it, and I would write a check for Blairsville. Anyway, I think it's hard. I think number one, you have to have a team member who recognizes that maybe they struggle with the decision making and wants to change. A lot of times our decision making is part of our DNA. It's part of how we're wired. And so some of our job as supervisors or leaders is putting the right people in the right places. And so I think that helps if you can do that on the front end. But if you've got somebody in a position that they struggle making decisions, I think it's just open, honest conversations. You come alongside them and you talk about it. Hey, this is what I saw, and I know you probably weren't crazy about this or this result. Can we talk about how this went? Let's walk through this together. So if they feel supported, if they feel loved, if they feel like their decisions matter, it's going to help coach them through that. But it's hard, and so I think the easiest thing to do is to make sure you're doing that on the front end, trying to put people into the right spots to make the kind of decisions they need to make according to how they're wired and what their propensity is. I don't know. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Well, I was just going to say,
yeah.
In just total transparency, I am one of those staff members who can have problems making decisions. And what I've discovered is that it depends on the nature of the decision. I mean, there are a million decisions that I make every day that I don't have any difficulty with, even including decisions that I make for my job. It's just that there are particular types of decisions that I find really difficult because I want to make sure I'm making the right decision and that everybody's happy at the end of the day. That's the thing that I really wrestle with. So that's been a big part of it, is identifying what sorts of decisions that are really the issue.
Yeah.
And then leaning into the pain.
Yeah.
You just have to be willing to be uncomfortable. And the more times you lean into that discomfort, the easier it gets to be in that space. I'm still not great at it, but I'm growing.
Just for the record, I wasn't thinking about you specifically when I answered, but you're right. There are some of those things, but I think that's important for you to understand. It's important for your supervisor to understand. Hey, because you're 100% right, and I think we might have even talked about it. There's some decisions you make, no problem. It's like, and you're going. And then there's others that it's a little slower, and I think it's important for me to understand where those differences are and for you as well. So yeah, good answer, Todd. You didn't even hesitate to respond. Very decisive. Well done. I'm just kidding. Yeah, Marie, up here in the front.
Okay, so you said about, and a lot of tonight is making decisions as a leader within an organization, whether you're supervisor, manager, or whatever, volunteer leader. What type of advice would you give to someone who is so accustomed to being a leader and having that authority figure role, but almost humbling themselves to knowing when to make a decision for themselves personally? And I speak to myself recently, I struggled so much stepping away from my previous job to the one that I'm in now, and every day I leave with such a smile on my face, feeling fulfilled again. But it was such a struggle with me personally to get to that position, almost like I was waiting for someone, no name dropping, my husband, to say, yeah, babe, do this. Because I didn't have the confidence in myself, but I can have the confidence if it's my job to have the confidence, but not for myself.
You know, I think the skill set is the same. It's just the application looks different. And so, I think honestly, a lot of the things we talked about tonight are things that apply to your personal life. And I know in the context of marriage, it's different. In the context of friendships, it looks a little different. But I think a lot of the concepts are the same, the principles are the same, it's just the application looks different. And so I think, in the context of, I mentioned at the beginning, like, know your vision. And some people think it's weird to have a personal vision statement. And I don't know, did Ronnie Dawes talk about that last month, talking about, we had somebody not too long ago talked about having a personal vision statement. And so, having a personal vision statement, again, that's going to help you filter some of those decisions about where you give yourself and give your time. And so I think even in the context of marriage, it can be a good thing to have a vision statement for your family to help you filter decisions. And so I think these principles are true even for your family if you'll apply them in that way, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question at all?
It does, but then how do you encourage yourself to, how do you encourage yourself to make the hard decisions, to be more decisive in your own life?
Yeah. Okay, I just know I'm going to sound arrogant when I say this. That idea is totally foreign to me. Because I'm such a this is what we do, and this is what we're going to do, and here's how we do it, and so I'm not sure how you get over the hump and go, okay, I'm going to start owning this. And
A brain transplant.
that's it. No, I think part of it might be to rethink your role in your marriage, because maybe for Chris, he would like you to be a little more decisive about some things,
He'd like me to be a little bit more dependent because I've always been so independent in my life.
Yeah.
I even was but what if I don't make enough? Or
Yeah.
what if something happens and we don't have health insurance? He's like, so what? We'll just deal with it when it happens. And I'm like, will you get anxious with me? And he doesn't.
Yeah, that's funny.
He's perfect for me, but it's, yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I don't have any good feedback for you. How do you flip the switch on that? Anybody have any thoughts? Michael, you look like you want to say something.
I was going to say that sometimes it can be helpful to allow yourself to fail. And because if you experience a big failure at one point, it can be extremely painful, but then you'll have that going forward. So I've experienced some extremely painful failures in my life, and I lean on those memories so that whenever I make big decisions in the future, I can say, well, if I fail at this, it's going to be painful, but it won't be as painful as that was. Right. And so it kind of, right, yeah, and that you come out of it, and that if you keep the faith and sort of push forward, that you come out of it intact.
Yeah, it's good feedback.
I have another question for you.
Lay it on me.
So you spoke about the value of looking ahead and imagining what could happen so that you're prepared to make a decision when that thing happens. And so how should people handle that when it comes to the development and promotion of their staff? So I imagine that most employers have a vision for who they intend on placing in higher roles at certain times, and they probably keep that vision to themselves most of the time because they don't want to instill arrogance or pride or whatever. And so how do you know when it's the right time to tell people and to let them in on what you're planning ahead for that person?
I don't know if there's a standard answer. I think it could be different for lots of different people. I will tell you, I would probably rather share it too early than too late, though. I would rather jump the gun and say, hey, here's what I believe for you too soon, rather than when they're on their way out the door go, oh, it's too bad because I thought you might be able to, and so, as a staff, and well, you weren't part of the residency program when we read a book called Hero Maker. And I think there's application in the non-church world too. But part of that idea of Hero Maker is that we help other people become the heroes. And one of the aspects of that is by just calling out in other people what you see. And it's just this I see in you principle, where here's what I see in you. Man, there's such value in calling that out in people. And for us, for our organization, obviously we're different because it's about the kingdom of God. And so it's easier for me to do that, with you, Michael, to go, man, Michael, here's what I see in you. Here's what I believe for you. And here's what you could be doing here. But even if you're not doing it here, I believe you could be, a lead pastor at a church. I believe you could be an evangelist, whatever it is. And so it's easier for us to be able to speak that because there's no fear of a competitor just going to steal you, or you know what I mean? And so I think it's a little different for us, but I honestly believe, I think I would do that as early as you can without instilling arrogance, like you said. But I think it's important to call that out and to speak the potential you see in people. And I think it's encouraging. I think it gives them a goal to shoot for. Northway Christian Community Church in Pittsburgh, they've got like 7 locations. I was sitting with one of their campus pastors the other day for lunch, and we were talking about their employee development plan. I think that's what they call it. But basically, every employee they have has a development plan. Like, okay, here's what you are, but here's what we believe you could be. And every quarter, they're sitting down with their supervisor talking over their plan, how they can move from here to there. And so I just asked him, like, are there people that go, nah, I'm good. I just want to be a receptionist my whole life. And he said, yeah, but they don't stay in our organization because we want people who want to grow and want to advance and want to develop. And, and so I think it's important for organizations to think that way and to develop people in a fear-free way of, well, what if we develop these people and they leave? And so, yeah, I think it's important.
Yeah, that's good.
That was a really long answer, sorry. I don't remember, Todd, you might remember. I think it was Zig Ziglar who said, what if you develop people and they leave? It would be worse if you don't develop them and they stay. I think it was something like that. Anyway, so that's always been kind of my philosophy when it comes to that. What else?
What happens when you run into a situation where, because you were saying about speaking confidently and authoritatively and the importance of that, what happens when you run into a situation where you have to change course and it's like in an embarrassing way?
It stinks.
For like a lot of churches with the coronavirus, for example, they just ran into issues and so do they just do it? Do they just take the hit?
I mean, that's the way we approach it. And part of that, again, is my wiring, my DNA is just, okay, we're going to be direct, we're going to be honest, and, we're not going to try to, give you the nice, shiny version. We're just going to say this. And so there's been several times since I've been here that I've had to break bad news to the church, like, hey, here's what's going on. We had in 2015, some of you guys were around for this. 2015, we were announcing the construction of our new kids and youth wing. And Todd was here for this, he remembers. And a week before we announced that we were constructing this $4 million youth and kids building, my youth pastor and my kids pastor informed me that they were leaving to go to North Carolina to help the former pastor plant a church. And it was like, what? You're doing, what? What is happening? And it was like I had one of those moments. And so we got up and announced, hey, we're building this building. It's going to be great. Woo! And people were excited. And the next week we came back and said, hey, I said we're building this building. It's going to be great. But I also need to let you know we're going to be doing it without Matt and Eli. And we love these guys. And we had to own that. And there was no way around it. There's been, even with the stuff in Blairsville, originally we thought it was going to cost us $300,000. And then it was like, nope, it's going to be closer to, just over $500,000. Now it's like, well, it's really going to be like $650,000 is what it's going to cost us. And that stuff stinks to stand up and tell people, oh, we were wrong. But I think that's the only thing you can do. Because I think when you're honest about that stuff, it builds confidence with the organization. Because when you start being shady about it, people start looking, So I think that's all you can do is just be honest, just own it, cast vision. It's an opportunity to go, but we'll be better next time. We've learned, we're going to move forward. And so
it's better to make the wrong decision than to be habitually indecisive all the time. Then.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, honestly, and you're 100% right. We as the leaders who have to talk through that stuff, we feel it a lot more than the people in our organization. Here's the thing too, even with our church, I love our church. I think our church is so valuable and so important, but the reality is, even people who attend here regularly don't put the same importance and value that I do. So when I say something is important, there's some people that are like, yeah, it's important, but the vast majority of people who hear it are like, well, it's some level of importance, but not nearly what you think it is, you know? And I think it's like that for a lot of organizations. So, yeah.
A lot of the work that I do is maybe at the time the most important thing going on in that person's life. And I've had bad outcomes that aren't my fault, or I've had, I've made minor mistakes here or there. And what I've learned is if you go to people and you're just honest about it, they like you just as much, if not more, than if you never made the mistake. Like it's just, that's been such a huge learning thing for me over the past 8 years, is that as long as you're honest about it, people really don't seem to hold a negative connotation.
Well, okay, think about just public figures who have done stupid things. The ones who own it get forgiven really quickly. The ones who deny it and deny it and deny it, the public will crucify them. They will go out of their way to smear their character. They will dig up old tweets. They will whatever they need to do. And so, I mean, again, I just think it's important. If you own it and go, I was stupid, or man, we misjudged. We had no idea. We thought this, but I just think your organization's so much better off. So,
Mel, Zach asks, do you actively shift those people out that do not want to grow, or does the culture drive them out? And what do you do when you have a good employee, but they just aren't growing?
Okay, first question. I've probably said this in this room for leadership night. I'm a firm believer that a healthy culture drives out unhealthy people, and an unhealthy culture drives out healthy people. And it's up to you to figure out who you're driving out, because I think all unhealthy cultures think they're healthy, and they're driving out unhealthy people. But I'm a firm believer that if there's somebody who's mismatched with the culture, they're going to be gone one way or the other. For me, if somebody is a good employee, they just don't want to grow, they are going to find themselves increasingly marginalized in the organization that's growing. If there's an organization that's stagnant as far as their growth and development, then an employee that's not growing and developing will fit in fine. There's not an issue. But when you've got growth from an organizational perspective and there's a lack of growth with the individual, then there's going to be conflict. Even for people who you love deeply, there's going to be conflict. And that's where it's got to be resolved somehow. And so I think there are fits probably in an organization, but I think the stagnant employee is going to become increasingly uncomfortable. So, yeah, if somebody's got the right heart, even if somebody's not a high performer, if they've got the right heart and the right character and they're supportive and they're all those things, man, I'm going to fight for them. But yeah, if somebody's a poor performer and their attitude stinks and they're subversive, and that makes it real easy to go, yeah, you're not a good fit here. You need to go. So, good question from Zach online. Good job, Zach online. Any other questions? We got a couple more minutes, but we can always finish early. Did the Steelers win? I didn't even see. Yeah, go Steelers. Thanks, Adam. That's all, Adam.